Our celebration of the beginning of baseball season, the month of April. And before we do anything in terms of performing for you, you are all going to join us, I hope, in a sing-along of America's favorite song, Take Me Out to the Ball.
Excerpted from the dissertation, an examination of the psychological revelations of the literary symbolism contained in the lyrics of the first and perhaps only verse of the well-known American folk hymn, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, by Professor Jan C. Snow. Consider the opening line. Couched in the imperative, this line reveals a demanding, infantile view of the world, which sets the tone of the entire work. In refusing to consider the possibility that he might take himself out to the ball game, the narrator exhibits his sense of inadequacy and gives indication of much deeper issues. The second line, take me out with the crowd, extends the use of this infantile imperative. The narrator's desire to be with the crowd shows us his extraordinary craving for acceptance. He not only demands to be taken out, but has a compelling need to be with the crowd, shadowing lack of self-worth. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. At first glance, this request for the purchase of sustenance merely expresses a state of economic dependence. Greater significance, however, can be found in the request for foods high in fat, sugar, and sodium, such as peanuts and Cracker Jack. The narrator's inability to control the consumption of these harmful substances evidences his disturbance, typical of individuals who suffer from eating disorders. And the line, I don't care if I ever get back, is a clear rejection of acceptance of responsibility. In admitting this, the narrator reveals his failure to develop more adult patterns of behavior, thus hampering his inability to form stable connections. His unreliability is clearly in conflict with a partner's need for security and predictability within a relationship. And it's root for the home team. Such mindless cheering for the home team is an indication of narrow chauvinism, characteristic of a personality whose critical capacities are poorly developed. Such unquestioned loyalty to the home team, based strictly on geographical proximity, is but a milder manifestation of the fanaticism encouraged by totalitarian regimes. And is incompatible with successful existence in a democratic society. If they don't win, it's a shame. Studies of the attitudes of criminals have uncovered a callous indifference to the feelings of others, such as that shown in this line. Unwilling to deal with the consequences of the team members' difficulties, the narrator dismisses the possibility of their not winning as merely a shame, thereby protecting himself from the emotional devastation he would experience were he to allow himself to identify closely with them and respond empathetically to their loss. And it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. This fascination with violence tells us the narrator is hungry for human contact, the ability to correctly decipher social cues, he takes refuge in violent behavior, striking out as a negative means of gaining the attention he seeks. The final line of our simplistic ode, "At the old ball game," completes the cyclic form, harkening back to the beginning, but with an important difference. The adjectival usage of the word old, herein applied to the ball game, may indicate nostalgia for an inaccurately recalled past that, when viewed through the lens of distorted memory, was indeed a happier time for all of us, even if it never occurred. Thank you. Baseball is by Greg Hall. Baseball is grass, chalk, and dirt displayed the same, yet differently. In every park that has ever heard the words, "play ball," baseball is a passion that bonds and divides all those who know it. Baseball is a pair of hands stained with newsprint, a set of eyes squinting to read a box score, a brow creased in an attempt to recreate a 3-hour game from an inch square block of type. Baseball is the hat I wear to mow the lawn. Baseball is a simple game of catch and the never-ending search for the perfect knuckleball.
Baseball is Willie versus Mickey, Gibson versus Koufax, and Buddy Biancalana versus the odds. Baseball links Kansan and Missourian, American and Japanese, but most of all, father and son. Baseball is the scent of spring, the unmistakable sound of a double down the line, and the face of a 10-year-old emerging from a pile of bodies with a worthless yet priceless foul ball.
Baseball is a language of very simple words that tell unbelievably magic tales. Baseball is 3 brothers in the same uniform on the same team for one brief summer, captured forever in a black and white photo by the table by the couch. Baseball is a glove on a shelf, oiled and tightly wrapped, slumbering through the stark winter months. Baseball is a breast pocket bulging with a transistor radio. Baseball is the reason there are transistor radios. Baseball is a voice in a box describing men you've never met, in a place you've never been, doing things you'll never have the chance to do. Baseball is a dream you never really give up on. Baseball is precious. Baseball is timeless. Baseball is forever.
Baseball is the most literary of sports, bursting with metaphor, image, and rhythm. And poets have long recognized the symbolic parallels between a baseball game and the events of daily life from which their poems sprout. A baseball game tells a story inside the confines of its form, just as a poem does. Its balls and strikes, hits and outs, runs and innings are very like the echoes and rhymes, stresses and stops, lines and stanzas of a poem. One might even say that baseball is Shakespearean.
Shakespearean Baseball Sonnet number 51 by Marco Serrao. Thus can my love excuse the weak offense of my hometown team when the pitching is good. No matter the batters can't reach the fence and don't draw as many walks as they should, nor do they blaze the base paths with much speed. Said offense is a catalogue of need. With good pitching, you can stay in the game and let your weak offense try to keep pace. Close, low-scoring games have a better name, though you're not any higher in the race than a team built the opposite of you. Both have a similar, also-ran view, and by all except the purist's measure, losing is not an aesthetic pleasure.
is the cruelest month is one of the most famous lines in poetry. But it is one that only makes sense in the post-apocalyptic world of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. For the rest of us clinging to hope, warm weather, and the eternal prospect of new beginnings, April is not cruel at all, but welcome. And in America, it's welcomed because of baseball. Indeed, baseball and spring, the meaning of one spills into the other in a mutually reinforcing bond of associations between the game and rebirth. It is the time when the white chill of snow is replaced by the diamond's green growth of grass. But this renewal is specific, even nationalistic, and uniquely American. Baseball speaks to our country's character and experience. In particular, the sport is rooted in the special connection that Americans have with the land. An encounter with nature formed a particular type of person and a particular type of democracy and culture.
Founding myth about baseball, that General Abner Doubleday invented the game in and around Cooperstown, New York, as an activity for his troops, is historically inaccurate, but satisfying nonetheless. Where better for baseball to have been created than in the sylvan woodlands of upstate New York, home of James Fenimore Cooper's frontier heroes, Leatherstocking and Natty Bumppo. If Cooperstown is a myth, it is one that endures because the idea of America's game being born out of the land confirms the specialness, not just of the game, but of the people the game represents. Yet it is impossible to disentangle baseball from its myths, and it seems uncanny that the first professional baseball game ever played actually occurred in urban Hoboken, New Jersey, at a place called Elysian Fields. Uncanny, because in Greek mythology, these are the fields where the gods and virtuous disported after they passed on. Is this heaven? Recall a certain magic ball field, built in an Iowa cornfield, where the old-time gods of baseball came out to play. The 1982 novel Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella, later adapted into the 1989 film Field of Dreams, starring Kevin Costner, certainly paid homage to that Greek myth.
The virtuous and heroic in baseball is the subject of much non-fiction journalism, of course, from beat writing to one of the greatest essays ever penned, John Updike's eulogy to Ted Williams, the best old hitter of the century. Inevitably, it is also the subject of both literary fiction and poetry. Poetry is especially suited to expressing the mythic attractions of the game. And back when poetry was more a part of regular conversation, sports writers and newspapermen used to verse comment on the game. In 1912, Franklin P. Adams penned his famous tribute to the psychology of baseball.
A Ballad of Baseball Burdens by Franklin P. Adams. The burden of hard hitting, slug away like Honus Wagner or like Tyrus Cobb, else fandom shouteth, "Who said you could play? Back to the Jasper League, you minor slob. Swat, hit, connect, line out. Get on the job, else you shall feel the brunt of fandom's ire. Biff, bang it, cloud it, hit it on the knob. This is the end of every fan's desire. The burden of good pitching, curved or straight, or in or out, or haply up or down, to puzzle him that standeth by the plate, to lessen, so to speak, his bat renown, like Christy Mathewson or Minor Brown. So pitch that every man can but admire, and offer you the freedom of the town. This is the end of every fan's desire. The burden of loud cheering, oh, the sounds, the tumult and the shouting from the throats of 40,000 at the polo grounds, sitting, aye, standing, sans their hats and coats. A mighty cheer that possibly denotes that cub or pirate fat is in the fire. Or as H. James would say, we've got their goats. This is the end of every fan's desire. The burden of a pennant, oh, the hope, the tenuous hope, the hope that's half a fear, the lengthy season and the boundless dope and the bromidic wait until next year. Oh, dread disgrace of trailing in the rear. Oh, piece of bunting flying high and higher, that next October it shall flutter here. This is the end of every fan's desire. Envoy, ah, fans, let not the quarry but the chase be that to which most fondly we aspire. For us, not stake but game, not goal but race. This is the end of every fan's desire.
And probably the single most well-known poem is Ernest Thayer's comic 1888 ballad of Mighty Casey at the Bat.
The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning left to play. And then, when Cooney died at first and Burroughs did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game.
A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought, if only Casey could but get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat.
But Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake, and the former was a no-good and the latter was a fake. So upon that stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat.
But Flynn let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and men saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second and Flynn a hugging third.
Then, from 5,000 throats and more, there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley, it rattled in the dell, it knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat, for Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat.
There was an ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And when, responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat, no stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat.
10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded as he wiped them on his shirt. Then, while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye, a sneer curled Casey's lip.
And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by, the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded, sped. "That ain't my style. Strike one," the umpire said.
From the benches, black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of a storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill the umpire! Kill him!" shouted someone from the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand.
With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two!"
"Fraud!" cried the maddened thousands, and the echo answered, "Fraud!" But one scornful look from Casey, and the multitude was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain. And they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again.
The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, And now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow.
Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out.
It took some years before the enterprising journalist James Wilson, aka the renowned sports journalist Brantland Rice, restored the much maligned Casey to his former glory.
Casey's revenge. There were saddened hearts in Mudville for a week or even more. There were muttered oaths and curses. Every fan in town was sore. Just think, said one, how soft it looked with Casey at the bat. And then to think he'd go and spring a bush league trick like that.
All his past fame was forgotten. He was now a hopeless shine. They called him Strikeout Casey from the mayor down the line. And as he came to bat each day, his bosom heaved a sigh with a look of hopeless fury, while a look of hopeless fury shone in mighty Casey's eye.
The lane is long, someone has said, that never turns again. And fate, though fickle, often gives another chance to men. And Casey smiled. His rugged face no longer wore a frown. The pitcher who had started all the trouble came to town.
All Mudville had assembled. 10,000 fans had come to see the twirler who had put Big Casey on the bum. And when he stepped into the box, the multitude went wild. He doffed his cap in proud disdain. But Casey only smiled.
Play ball! The umpire's voice rang out. And then the game began. But in that throng of thousands, there was not a single fan who thought that Mudville had a chance. And with the setting sun, their hopes sank low. The rival team was leading 4-1.
The last half of the ninth came round with no change in the score. But when the first man up hit safe, the crowd began to roar. The din increased. The echo of 10,000 shouts were heard when the pitcher hit the second and gave 4 balls to the third.
3 men on base. Nobody out. 3 runs to tie the game. A triple meant the highest niche in Mudville's Hall of Fame. But here the rally ended and the gloom was deep as night when the 4th one fouled to catcher and the 5th flew out to right.
A dismal groan in chorus came. Scowl was on each face. When Casey walked up, bat in hand, and slowly took his place, his bloodshot eyes in fury gleamed. His teeth were clenched in hate. He gave his cap a vicious hook and pounded on the plate.
But fame is fleeting as the wind, and glory fades away. There were no wild and woolly cheers, no glad acclaim that day. They hissed and groaned and hooted as they clamored, "Strike him out!" But Casey gave no outward sign that he had heard this shout.
The pitcher smiled and cut one loose. Across the plate it spread. Another hiss, another groan. "Strike one," the umpire said. Zip! Like a shot, the second curve broke just below his knee. "Strike 2!" The umpire roared aloud, but Casey made no plea.
No roasting for the umpire now. His was an easy lot. But here, the pitcher whirled again. Was that a rifle shot? A whack, a crack, and out through the space the leather pellet flew. A blot against the distant sky, a speck against the blue.
Above the fence in center field, in rapid whirling flight, the sphere sailed on. The blot grew dim and then was lost to sight. Then 10,000 hats were thrown in the air, 10,000 threw a fit, but no one ever found the ball that mighty Casey hit.
Oh, somewhere in this favored land, dark clouds may hide the sun. And somewhere bands no longer play and children have no fun. And somewhere over blighted lives there hangs a heavy pall. But my little hearts are happy now, for Casey hit the ball.
Requires the author to get down and dirty in the rough and tumble of a difficult sport played mostly by young men, full of aggression and testosterone, not always a pretty sight. But poetry creates just the right tone to convey the larger meaning of the game, if not always the game itself. There are not many poems from the participant's point of view. With a poem comes the almost automatic assumption that the poet will see through the baseball game to something else, frequently the restoration of some lost unity or state of grace. Poetic baseball creates an elegy in which something lost can be either regained or at least properly mourned. In 1910, the great sports writer Grantland Rice made just that point in his Game Called. That as the players and the crowd exit the stadium, but through the night there shines the light home behind the silent hill.
In his comic riff on sports, the comedian George Carlin croons that in baseball, you go home. There are a lot of poems in which families reconnect, sometimes successfully, by watching baseball or by having fathers teach sons how to play.
For modernist poets, the heirs to Eliot, baseball was generally ignored because it was too associated with a romantic or even sentimental view of life. Modernism was nothing but hard-headed, and it was difficult to find a place for games. William Carlos Williams, in his 1923 poem, The Crowd at the Ball Game, delights in the game precisely because it's a time out from the humdrum grind of daily work. And this purposelessness has a point. All to no end save beauty, the eternal. Williams is mostly after the relationship between the crowd and the individual. The game is really not the thing. The Crowd at the Ball Game by William Carlos Williams. The crowd at the ball game is moved uniformly by a spirit of uselessness which delights them. All the exciting detail of the chase and the escape, the error, the flash of genius, all to no end save beauty, the eternal. So in detail, they, the crowd, are beautiful. For this to be warned against, saluted and defied, it's alive, venomous, it smiles grimly, its words cut. The flashy female with her mother gets it. The Jew gets it straight. It is deadly, terrifying. It is the Inquisition, the Revolution. It is beauty itself that lives day by day in them idly. This is the power of their faces. It is summer. It is solstice. The crowd is cheering. The crowd is laughing in detail, permanently, seriously, without a thought.
Poem Writing by Mary Ann Moore. Fanaticism? No. Writing is exciting, and baseball is like writing. You can never tell with either how it will go or what you will do. Generating excitement, fever in the victim, pitcher, catcher, fielder, batter. Victim in what category? Owlman watching from the press box? To whom does it apply? Who is excited? Might it be I? It's a pitcher's battle all the way. A duel, a catcher's as with cruel Puma paw. Elston Howard lumbers lightly back to plate. His spring de-winged a bat swing. They have that killer instinct. Yet Alston, whose catching arm has hurt them all with the bat, when questioned says unenviously, "I'm very satisfied, we won." Shorn at the batting ground says, "We robbed by a technicality." When 3 players on a side play 3 positions and modify conditions, the massive run need not be everything. Going, is it? Roger Maris has it. Running fast. You will never see a fighter catch. Well, Mickey, leaping like the devil. Why, gilded, although deer sounds better, snares what was speeding towards its treetop nest, one handing the souvenir to be meant to be caught by you or me. Assign Yogi Berra to Cape Canaveral. He could handle any missile. He's no feather. Strike 2. Foul back, a blur, it's gone. You would infer that the bat had eyes. He put the wood to that one. Prayed Scouron says, "Thanks, Mel. I think I helped a little bit." All business, each, and modesty. Blanchard, Richardson, Kubeck, Boyer. In that galaxy of 9, say which won the pennant? Each. It was he. Those 2 magnificent saves from the knee throws by Boyer, fitnesses in 2s, like Whitey's 3 kinds of pitch and pre-diagnosis with pick-off psychosis. Pitching is a large subject. Your arm, too true at first, can learn to catch your corners, even trouble Mickey Mantle. Raise the Yankee, my baby pitcher, Monteo. With some pedagogy, you'll be tough, premature prodigy. They crowd him and curve him and aim for the knees, trying indeed. The secret implying, I can stand here, bat held steady. One may suit him, none has hit him. Imponderables smite him. Muscle kinks, infections, spike wounds require food, rest, respite from ruffians. Drat it! Celebrity costs privacy. Cow's milk, tiger's milk, soy milk, carrot juice, brewer's yeast, high potency concentrates, presage victory. Sped by Luis Arroyo, Hector Lopez, deadly in a pinch. And yes, it's work. I want you to bear down, but enjoy it while you're doing it. Mr. Houck and Mr. Sane, you have a rummage sale, don't sell Roland Sheldon or Tom Thresh, studded with stars and belt and crown. The stadium is an adastrium. Oh, flashing Orion, your stars are muzzled like the lion.
Mae Swenson turned baseball into an amusing puzzle and wordplay game based on romance and courtship. Analysis of baseball by Mae Swenson. It's about the ball, the bat, and the mitt. Ball hits bat, or it hits mitt. Ball doesn't hit. Bat doesn't hit ball. Bat meets it. Bat bounces off bat, flies air, or thuds ground, dud, or it fits mitt. Bat waits for ball to mate. Ball hates to take bat's bait. Ball flirts, bat's late. Don't keep the date. Ball goes in, whack to mitt, and goes out, whack, back to mitt. Ball fits mitt, but not all the time. Sometimes ball gets hit, pow, when bat meets it, and sails to a place where mitt has to quit in disgrace. That's about the bases loaded. About 40,000 fans exploded. It's about the ball, the bat, the mitt, the bases, and the fans. It's done on a diamond and for fun. It's about home, and it's about run.
And at the end, inevitably, everyone heads home. The beat poet Gregory Corso has a typically hallucinatory encounter with Ted Williams in The Dream of the Baseball Star, in which Williams unaccountably is unable to hit a single pitch, and the umpire, dressed in a strange attire, thundered his judgment, "You're out." Dream of a Baseball Star by Gregory Corso. I dreamed Ted Williams leaning at night against the Eiffel Tower, weeping. He was in uniform, and his back lay at his feet, knotted and twiggy. "Randall Gerald says you're a poet," I cried. "So do I. I say you're a poet." He picked up his bat with blown hands, stood there astraddle as he would in the batter's box, and laughed, flinging his schoolboy wrath toward some invisible pitcher's mound, waiting to pitch all the way from heaven. It came. Hundreds came, all afire. He swung and swung and swung and swung and connected not one, sinker, Cook, Herrmann, right down the middle. 100 strikes. The umpire, dressed in strange attire, thundered his judgment. "You're out!" And the phantom crowd's horrific boo dispersed the gargoyles from Notre Dame. And I screamed in my dream, "God, throw thy merciful pitch! Herald the crack of bats! Hooray, the sharp liner to left! Yea, the double, the triple! Hosanna, the home run!"
Fellow beat poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti invoked baseball to make a civil rights point. A baseball canto. Watching baseball, sitting in the sun, eating popcorn, reading Ezra Pound, and wishing that Juan Marichal would hit a hobo right through the Anglo-Saxon tradition in the first canto and demolish the barbarian invaders. When the San Francisco Giants take the field and everybody stands up for the national anthem with some Irish tenor's voice piped over the loudspeakers, with all the players struck dead in their places, and the white umpires like Irish cops in their black suits and little black caps pressed over their hearts, standing straight and still like at some funeral of a Blarney bartender, and all facing east as if expecting some great white hope or the founding fathers to appear on the horizon like 1066 or 1776.
Instead, in the bottom of the first, and a roar goes up as he clouts the first one into the sun and takes off like a foot runner from Thebes. The ball is lost in the sun, and maidens wail after him as he keeps running through the Anglo-Saxon epic. And Tito Fuentes comes up looking like a bullfighter in his tight pants and small pointy shoes. And the right field bleachers go mad with Chicanos and blacks and Brooklyn beer drinkers. "Tito, sock it to him, sweet Tito." And sweet Tito puts his foot in the bucket and smacks one that doesn't come back at all and flees around the bases like he's scraping from the United Fruit Company. And the gringo dollar beats out the pound. And sweet Tito beats it out like he's beating out usury, not to mention fascism and anti-Semitism.
And the Chicano bleachers go loco again, as Juan belts the first ball out of sight, and rounds first and keeps going, and rounds second, and rounds third, and keeps going, and hits pay dirt to the roars of the grungy populace. And some nut presses the backstage panic button for the tape-recorded national anthem again to save the situation. But it don't stop nobody this time. In their revolution round the loaded white bases, in this last of the great Anglo-Saxon epics, in the territorial libre of baseball.
effort it takes by African Americans like Quincy Troop's poem for my father about the impact of the Negro Leagues and the prowess of such players as Cool Papa Bell give another angle on the tradition. Poem for my father by Quincy Troop, or Quincy T. Troop Sr. Father, it was an honor to be there in the dugout with you. The glory of the great black men swinging their lives as bats at tiny white balls, burning in at unbelievable speeds, riding up and in and out as a curve breaking down wicked, like a ball falling off a table, moving away, snaking down, screwing its stitched magic into Chitlin circuit air, its comma seams spinning towards breakdown, dipping like a hipster bebopping, a knee-deep stride in the Charlie Parker 40s, wrists curling like a swan's neck behind a slick back, cupping an invisible ball of dreams. And you there, Father, regal as an African Obeah man, sculpted out of wood from a sacred tree of no name, no place. Origin, think branches branching down into Cherokee, and someplace else lost way back in Africa, the sap running dry, crossing from North Carolina into Georgia, inside Grandmother Mary's womb, where your mother had you in the violence of that red soil. Ink blotter news, gone now, into blood graves of American blues. Sponging Rococo truth, long gone as dinosaurs, the agent-oranged landscape of former names, absecant of African polysyllables. Dry husks, consonants there now, in their place, names flat as polluted rivers, and that guitar string smile always snaking across some virulent American redneck's face. Scorching like the atomic heat, mushrooming over Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The fever-blistered shadows of it all, inked as etchings into sizzled concrete. But you there, Father, through it all, a yardbird solo, riffing on the bat and ball glory, breaking down the fabricated myths of white major league legends, of who was better than who, beating them at their own crap game, with killer bats as Bud Powell swung his silence into beauty, of a Josh Gibson home run, skittering across piano keys of bleachers, shattering all manufactured legends up there in light, struck out white knights on the risky edge of amazement, all the miraculous truth sluicing through, steeped and disguised in the blues confluencing, like the point that across when fast ball hides itself up a slider's curve. Curved and poised as an ass-scratching Uncle Tom, who old Satchel Paige delivered his famed hesitation pitch before coming back with a hard, high, fast one, is slicker, sliding, a quicker than professional hitman. The deadliness of it all, the sudden strike like that of the brown bomber's crossing right of Sugar Ray Robinson's lightning cobra bite. And you, there, Father, through it all, catching rhymes of chono pozo balls, drumming like conga beats into your catcher's mitt, hard and fast as cool Papa Bell jumping into bed before the lights went out. Of the old Negro Baseball League, a promise you were, Father, a harbinger of shockwaves soon come.
another significant development in the annals of baseball history. From the 1866 founding of the first female baseball team at Vassar College, to the Bloomer Girl Leagues that crisscrossed the country for 40 years beginning in 1875, to, in most of our own lifetimes, the creating of the Little League program for young female athletes. Bloomer teams, so named after the loose-fitting trousers they wore in the fashion of suffragette Amelia Jenks Bloomer, came from Midwestern, Southern, and Eastern states and were made up of young single women who earned a living playing baseball at a time when women's professional options were very limited. Bloomer girls traveled across the country, across states, and town to town by rail, bringing with them their own fences, tents, and grandstands. And their schedules were grueling. In 1903, the Boston Bloomer girls played and won 28 games in 26 days. Over the July 4th weekend of that year alone, they played 6 games in 5 different towns in Oklahoma. The Bloomer girls made frequent stops in Colorado, playing in Denver, Kansas City, La Junta, Lamar, Les Animas, Rocky Ford, Salida, and Trinidad. The La Junta Tribune gave the following account of their visit. The Bloomer girls have come and they have also went. The ladies from the intellectual center of the universe demonstrated that they are artists at the national game and know how to play ball. The old stagers who attended expected to be amused by the antics of a female baseball player were rather startled when they saw a Bloomer line, the sphere over the home plate, with all the speed of a cannonball or mightily knocking the ball over the canvas fence in center field. By the 1930s, the Bloomer teams had hung up their gloves, and professional women's baseball, I got basketball on my mind, baseball would disappear until the formation of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. First Girls in the Little League Baseball by J. Patrick Lewis. December 26, 1974, Title IX of the 1972 Education Act is signed, providing for equal opportunity in athletics for girls as well as boys. The year was 1974, when Little Leaguers learned to score. President Ford took out his pen and signed a law that said from then on, women too would have the chance to wear the stripes and wear the pants. Now what you hear as flags unfurl is attaboy and attagirl.
Farewell to the boys of summer with this bittersweet end of the season rumination. October by Hester Jewell Dawson. The high fly ball arches out above left field, hangs there in the sky outblazing the sun, while 50,000 heads swings and cry, over the wall, over the wall, then hold fixed and dumb as the ball drops down and down, a dead bird into a waiting glove. And there you have it, the song, the flight, the perilous whisper of truth or of love, or possibly of faith. Then the descent and the end of the game.
As with a new season, hope springs eternal, not just that the new season is starting, but that someday more contemporary poets will give baseball the kind of relaxed attention that does the sport justice. Empty Ballparks by Toby Shiverick. Empty ballparks speak. It's true, you know. They are not just empty spaces surrounded by tiers of empty seats. They speak with a silent eloquence of green grass and ghosts of games past and promises of ball games to come. You have to relax and listen. Consider it therapy. And thank you for your kind attention to our evening's program.